What's up guys, Chris B from Kaizen Elite here. So I put a post up on my Facebook page just asking how many people would like to know about a sort of new sort of hamstring training variation. And this is just a variation on the glute bridge and the full stand to stand bridge. And really it's just taking advantage of the two functions of the hamstring. Now the hamstring helps you to extend at the hip, so it helps to take your hips basically this way, and it helps to curl the knee, so it helps to create knee flexion, so bring your heel towards your ass. Now in this exercise here, what you'll notice is as you get to the top, I'm not actually completely straightening my legs. And that's because my heels are on top of the bench and they're not actually pressing into the side of it. So in order to get this pressure up, I have to dig my heels down into the bench. In other words, I'm trying to extend my hips and curl them and curl my legs up at the same time. So the two variations I like are the straight leg one here, where you're really putting a lot of tension in the hamstring, because for the hip, this is the most advantageous position for the hamstring because it's really short and it's contracted. But there's two hamstrings. There's one that joins at the hip, and then one sort of just above the knee. And then you have one that joins just below the hip, pretty much about there, so really right below the hip bone, and then just below your knee there. Now because of that, when you put it in this position here, that one that connects to the just below your hip and on, below your knee, on the back of your knee, is fully stretched. So it has to produce a lot of tension in this position here. So it's putting, so peak contraction or peak tension is there, where your hamstring's at the most disadvantageous position. So I think this is probably one of the best ways to prehab or prepare your hamstrings for more sort of, intense work, because you're putting it in, this really, really awkward sort of forced contraction. Now the next one is a bit more applicable to sprinting and power movements. It's when you're putting the hamstrings in a bit of a more advantageous position while going under hip flexion. So make sure your heels are not touching the side of the bench, so digging into it this way. Make sure you're putting pressure with your heels directly downwards onto the bench, because otherwise you're going to be trying to put pressure, sort of downwards as opposed to down and back. The key to this is making sure that your heels are digging downwards into the bench, so you actually have to produce an isometric contraction at the knee. Now, this is probably the easier variation, but it's probably the one people are going to get more out of, because your hamstring is in a very, very advantageous, strong position at both the knee and the hip. Because right here, that's pretty much a position where you're going to get the best blend of not only stability and force and peak contraction at the hip, but also where you're going to get a lot of stability, but also a really large potential for force production at the knee as well. So by doing this one, I feel like it's sort of it can be the progression on from the straight bridge. I prefer people to do the straight bridge version first, just because it builds a bit more core strength and a bit more hamstring control, and then go into this one, which is just it's really a traditional glute bridge, that two-legged bent one, just with the heels raised up. Now this next variation is, I feel, if there was such a thing as sport-specific strength training exercises, this would be it for sprinting. Now the reason when you're doing the one-legged ones you want to actually cock the leg up is not only because if you look at this, it's similar to how you'd be in a sprint. The non-working leg, the leg that's off the bench, is sort of curled up with the toes pointed upwards. You're trying to bring your heel towards your arse underneath your centre of gravity, as if you're about to punch down into the ground. And then that back heel, that sort of the heel that's working, the leg that's working on the bench, is actually pressing through as if you're extending to complete a step when you're sprinting. And the other reason you want to make sure you actually flex that non-working leg, that at the hip and the knee, is because it stops you from cheating by extending your lumbar spine. So what you'll notice is that a lot of people, when you tell them, okay, so do a glute bridge or contract your glutes or do a hip thrust, is they won't flex here. They won't get any tension in their glutes because they've got sleepy, very weak glutes. They'll flex at the lower back instead to try and achieve that extension, which is bad, not only bad for your back, but it's bad, it's not optimal function. So this is probably my favourite variation. Same again, for this one, you're probably going to have to put the bench, dig the bench into something, like, wedge it into a wall, because you can see it sort of sliding about as I do it. But again, make sure your heel is pressing directly downwards into the bench. Make sure that it's not sort of pressing in like this way, because that's going to make you use a lot more quads than you really want to. You want to make this a hamstring and glute exercise. Okay, so the next one is probably my absolute favourite variation of this, is a single leg bent hip thrust. So making sure your heel's on top of the bench again, Again, you want your legs to be at around a 70 to 90 degree angle, the working leg I mean, and do the same thing again. Make sure your core is tight on all of the variations. Make sure your abs are contracted, and really just try and push yourself back onto your shoulders. So the only pressure points you want to be sort of feeling the weight in are the heel digging directly downwards and in your traps, because you're pushing yourself back onto them. So the key points for this are: make sure you're digging your heel downwards into the bench, as if you're trying to curl your leg up. Make sure that you're contracting your abs and you're actually flexing at the glute. If you contract your abs and flex the glute, I guarantee you won't get much lower back involvement at all. Okay, now this exercise, I really feel like it's really useful as a warm-up. So if you include it as an isometric contraction and superset it with hip flexor stretches, it can be really good for opening up your hips and restoring, function to, really tight hips. It can be used as a standalone exercise by itself, just to improve your hamstring strength. You can use this for low reps or high reps. If you do it on a Swiss ball, you can add instability to it. So you can use it as a rehab or prehab exercise. If you use it on a solid bench, it can be just a pure strength training or hypertrophy exercise. And I also like to do it with sprints. I'll superset this with sprints because I feel like I don't get a lot of hamstring involvement in my sprinting, even though I should do. So I use this beforehand as a pre-activation. Okay, anyway, lads, that's my, lads and ladettes, that is my favourite hamstring training exercise. And as you can see, it doesn't require any extra equipment. It doesn't require any, much gear at all. You can do it, a chair propped up against your wall at home if you really want to. So, yeah, give that a try in your warm-ups, in your next training session. Mix up doing isometrics, sort of hold in, the sort of the top position, and then doing, just normal reps as well. Peace.